This is Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel. If you drive long haul, short haul, or heavy haul, they're here to empower and inspire women in the trades on tncradio.live. So gear down, sit back, and enjoy.
Welcome to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel. We're a show that works to inspire and empower women in trucking, in the trades, and everywhere. We tackle all kinds of topics and work to encourage women to be their very best with informative guests and women who are champions. I'm Shelley, and
I'm Kaycie.
Hormones are a huge issue for women. Our bodies are regulated by them, and this even applies to men. Women, though, have more issues with hormones, so when they go out of balance, they can really throw us off. Hormones must work together to keep our bodies functioning properly. Major stress and life events can throw them off. A high-stress lifestyle can seriously throw off hormones. Today, we have a hormone expert and naturopathic doctor. Dr. Kaycie Grigel helps her patients restore their thyroid, adrenal, and reproductive hormones with holistic hormone support. We're looking forward to her insights so we can help women get themselves back into balance. Welcome, Dr. Kaycie. Pardon the pun, but I'd say you're just what the doctor ordered for our listeners. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So it seems like women are quite often pigeonholed. I know the medical community for so many years kind of modeled it after the man's body, which makes no sense at all. When women have had hormone issues, they haven't been taken as seriously as they should be. And so often the medical community has used the word hysterical to describe women, which is actually a Greek origin, the word hyster, which describes the uterus, but something that shows a mental breakdown or some sort of insufficiency that pertains to women. And it's influenced how women have been treated by the medical community and how they've been cared for. Women get a bad rap when it comes to hormones, you know?
Well, that's a really interesting point because our conventional medical community has some really amazing tools. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I am 100% in favor of helping ourselves any way we can. And, in my therapy, I did it all. I did surgery, I did chemotherapy, I did radiation. But where the conventional medical community really doesn't have a lot of tools is where we're looking at subtle things that happen over the long term and the ability to support our individual organ systems naturally and sustainably. Just in the way of being able to help to restore function over time. So that's where we have some amazing natural tools for helping to support all of our hormone or endocrine organ systems.
So do you think there's an actual disconnect in the medical community on working with women? I know that when I've gone to doctors, some of them can be really good and some of them are just, I feel like I'm being pigeonholed into a baseline and it just doesn't fit. And they don't always listen.
Sure. Yeah. So, basically what we have with our, with the way that we practice medicine in this country is it's very disease-based. And so when we look at people, in the Western model, we tend to see people as either sick or healthy, and there's no spectrum. And so when we can really look at health as a spectrum, our hormones are very, very, they're very, very subtle, and they're very, difficult to, sort of say this is sick or this is healthy. There are some very specific situations where our hormones can be, wildly out of balance, and that's a very specific kind of situation. But for most of us, as we go through our life, because our hormones are they're so sensitive to our environment, and they're so sensitive to the ways that, we care for ourselves. And they have to be, because they have to be reacting to keep our body in balance relative to our environment. But our conventional medical community doesn't have a ton of tools. It's really what's in your toolbox. And if it's hard when you don't have a tool in your toolbox to fix something, to be able to really address it. And so that's really where I'm coming from, is we have a lot of really good tools in our toolbox for helping hormones to be at their best.
sorry, I didn't know that hormones reacted to your environment. I had no idea. Or the way that you treat your body and its environment. I didn't really realize that. I guess they go hand in hand until just now. And now that you said it, I started thinking, because I'm turning 53 here in a few months, and I've noticed there's a big change in everything that's happening to my body. And that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, you are right in the thick of it at 53. Absolutely. So, what's very interesting is that our thyroid and our adrenal glands and our reproductive hormones, our estrogen and progesterone, they're all connected. They're all controlled by our brain. So our brain, ultimately, we have a gland that's in the middle of our brain that's called our hypothalamus. And our hypothalamus makes the signals that tells all of those different hormone producing organs to do their job. And so all of those hormones are super interconnected. And what I often see is that as women get into their late 30s and 40s and even 50s, that if one hormone, like thyroid, for instance, if that hormone is starting to get out of balance, we might see the other hormones get out of balance at the same time.
Yeah, like my thyroid died 5 years ago, and I'm on Synthroid, and it keeps going up and up, and I'm up to 125 mcgs that I take every day. But man, I don't know. We're gonna talk after this. I feel like I'm way out of whack.
Yeah. And so just going back to that environment and that environmental control, our brains, so because our brains are in charge of our hormones, they really are, our hormones are very, very sensitive to our environment. They change, according to light and dark exposure, our sleep and wake cycles. Stress can play a huge role. Even hot and cold exposure, for instance, with the hypothyroid, if you go outside and exercise in the cold weather, that boosts up thyroid production. So even hot and cold, plays a big role.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. Wow.
All sorts of things play an interesting role. And one of the things that's really interesting, just like this is sort of an aside, one of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of our neurotransmitter production, and our neurotransmitters are the chemicals in our brains that tell us how we think and how we move and how we, react to situations. We have lots of those receptors in our eyes, and they're very reactive to light. And that reactivity can actually change the way that we produce our hormones as well. So even, what I tell a lot of women is, especially up in Alberta, if you're during these very dark months between November and January, if you're outside, don't wear sunglasses. Of course, if you're out in the snow, don't go snowblind. Don't anything that's going to hurt your eyes. Wear some sunglasses. If you're driving into the sun, wear sunglasses. But generally, keep them off, because you're stimulating your thyroid health when you see the sunshine.
Really?
Wow.
So okay, so would this play against me? Because when I work up north, all through the winter, when I'm on night shift for 2 weeks, I don't see the sun at all. I get up and it's dark. I go to bed, it's dark. So 2 weeks, zero sun. Do you think that has affect anything? And night shift, and because I know the doctor did say that night shift does affect women that are in their 50s more than it does anybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're doing night shift, if you're driving at night, and you're not getting a lot of sun, just like natural sun. Vitamin D production obviously is very important and plays a role in hormone regulation, and that's impacted by our sun exposure, but also just our ability to see light is really impacts our mood. Things like seasonal affective disorder, that's a real thing. It impacts thyroid production. It impacts the way that we have our circadian rhythm, which is the way that our body produces hormones throughout the day, and really impacts our adrenal hormones like cortisol. So yeah, that can absolutely play a role. So some women, people in general, some people will get a light box, that you can kind of sit in front of while you're eating breakfast or, just hanging out. And and they even make like light glasses that have
does a ring light count that I use for my self tapes that I have for my auditions? Can I use the ring light?
That'll do some of it. Yeah. I mean, it'll be something. But absolutely, I think it's definitely worth considering, getting some sort of light source, to help with regulating that circadian rhythm, the production of hormones. You tend to, when it's dark out, your brain, your pineal gland in your brain wants to make melatonin, which helps you be sleepy and want to sleep. And then when it's light out, it sort of flips the switch to making thyroid.
2 weeks is a long time with no sun,
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. It is. And when we lived up in Alaska, it was really distinct, and especially for the people who were working that shift up on the North Slope where really the sun never came up, we really saw that it was really impactful for their hormone production and for mood and immunity and all those kinds of things.
Interesting. When you talk about sunshine, I have throughout my life never liked gray days. Gray, rainy days, especially, it's like, it just seems like harder to get motivated. So it's actually a hormone-driven thing then.
Yeah, I think it is. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think that it really impacts the way that you produce, again, those neurotransmitters, which are sort of like hormones for your brain.
Okay.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Great leaders challenge their people not to stop at the first right answer. Tighten the Lug Nuts is the book that will help you move past that first right answer to be more effective, more productive, and more successful. This book serves as a blueprint that can be easily applied by leaders, entrepreneurs, truckers, owner-operators, all of us in our everyday lives. This is one of the best leadership books you can read to help you accelerate towards your personal and professional goals. Plus, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to truckerschristmasgroup.org. Visit TightenTheLugNuts.com to order your copy today. Kaycie Grigel is nothing short of amazing. She not only drives the world's biggest truck as a heavy equipment operator in northern Alberta, Canada. She's an international motivational speaker and the author of Dream Big, an autobiography about overcoming a lifetime of trauma and abuse that led to dreams of success. Kaycie inspires people the world over to change their lives and improve their self-worth. Her book will change your life. She's passionate about personal growth and believes anyone can change their circumstances and overcome their obstacles if they believe in themselves. Her life will amaze you and seriously inspire you. Be sure to order a copy of her book, Dream Big, on Amazon.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel.
Could you explain for the listeners out there, because I'm sure there's a lot of women who don't know what the function of the adrenal gland is?
Absolutely. And, I feel like the adrenal glands are really sort of a linchpin in our hormone health, especially as we go through menopause. So our adrenal glands are, they're these little pyramid-shaped glands. They sit on top of our kidneys. And our kidneys, filter everything out and they make urine. But they sit there as like little pyramids, little hats on top of the kidneys, and they make a wide variety of hormones. But some of the most important hormones for our discussion today are stress hormones. So they make what we think of as like adrenaline. That helps when we have stress. And they also make another stress hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is super, super crucial for us because it regulates a lot of stuff. What cortisol does, so basically stress for us today is a little bit different than the way that our bodies are programmed to handle stress, because historically for our ancestors, stress meant I have to escape from danger. So I have to run from the bear, right? I have to climb a tree. And so what stress hormones do is they prepare our bodies to think fast, run fast, and escape. So it makes our brains go fast, it makes our heart pump fast, and it makes our muscles move quickly. And so that's what our adrenaline does, or epinephrine. That's the medical word for the same thing. And then cortisol, which you maybe have heard of in the media. Cortisol is a hormone that mobilizes sugar from storage. And so what it does is it takes our stores, it turns it into sugar so you can feed the brain and the muscles and the heart so you can escape from danger. And cortisol is produced, like we talked about, in that circadian rhythm, where we have a lot of it first thing in the morning when we wake up, and it goes really low at night while we're supposed to be sleeping. So cortisol is really, really associated with how awake we feel.
So does it happen often that the adrenal glands kind of get out of whack as you age, or what? Because I know I've seen in the pharmacy adrenal supplements, right? And I've never really paid attention to it because I don't need to. And so I just kind of walk by, but I was curious about that.
Absolutely. So there's some really important things about the connection between adrenal health and cortisol and the rest of our hormones. So one of the things that's really important is that our adrenals function, because they're so tuned to how much stress that we feel. The stress response is sort of all governed by our adrenals. And if we have a ton of stress over time, what happens is our adrenals become like trigger happy. Like the smallest amount of stress. And I hear this from my patients a lot, that they'll say, I just don't tolerate stress anymore. Like my husband comes in and says something to me and I fly off the handle, or my kids do something and I get so upset, and that's not me. And so as we have lots of stress over time, what can happen is that our adrenals start producing those hormones really easily. And then, and so what we end up having is what we call something like adrenal fatigue. So adrenal fatigue is when those adrenals they don't produce as optimally anymore. And there's kind of a couple stages. One of those stages is kind of at the beginning. We'll see people who they don't sleep very well because they're making stress hormones all night. You may have insomnia because of that. You may have weight gain because of it, because cortisol is mobilizing sugar. And then guess what happens? If we mobilize sugar and then we don't go running through the trees, we just keep sitting wherever we're sitting, that sugar doesn't get used. It comes back to our liver, and our liver turns it into triglycerides. And then guess what? It gets put around our bellies, and then we gain weight around the middle.
Yeah.
No fun at all, right?
No.
That's the first type of adrenal fatigue, where we have this sort of increase in hormones, and it makes us feel like we have more stress all the time. And then what happens?
What I'm going through right now, my God, all of a sudden I have I'm up, insomnia, and I've never had that problem. My God.
Yeah. Well, and as your reproductive hormones change, and as your thyroid changes, all of those can potentially, they can also potentially play a role in insomnia. They can all make it so you don't sleep well. But cortisol is kind of a first thing. What we see over time as cortisol as our adrenals get more depleted, is that then you just, that's when you get really fatigued and your adrenals sort of just like poop out, and they just don't make those stress hormones at all. And that's when you feel super exhausted.
Dr. Kaycie, is there a way that we can take control of our bodies? You hear about bioidentical hormones and all of that. I think especially with women, we want to be regulated here. It's like you feel like you're being betrayed by your body when it's doing this and that. It's like, I don't have time for this.
That's right. So the reason I go on and on and on about adrenals is because, like I said, I feel like it's really the linchpin in our hormone health, because as we go through menopause, our ovaries are what make our estrogen and progesterone as we go through our, sort of fertile years. But as we go through menopause, they shut down, they stop. And the production of estrogen and progesterone, guess where that job goes? Our adrenal glands.
Okay.
So if our adrenal glands are already super tired from a life of high stress, menopause is really hard. People really struggle through menopause. And so a lot of what a lot of the things that we can do to kind of take control, first of all, is, we can really work on the way that our minds interpret our environment. So, ultimately it's about your mind feeling safe and in control of your world. And that can take a lot of self-reflection. It can take a lot of reorganizing of how your life works. But the more we can feel, because we're supposed to have stress, stress helps us grow. But if our life is overwhelmed by stress, Kathy, I know you do a lot of work with people in super high stress situations, and it can be very hard to get out of a very stressful life situation. But the more we can really tend to ourselves and practice self-love.
Like hit the beach when I'm here in California, that works.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hit the beach. I mean, and so when I teach, I teach a women's health transformation masterclass, and I really like to start with what I call the foundations of hormone health. And those foundations, I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. And the legs, there's three legs, and they're nourishment. So, what you put in your body. Their rest, so how you actually, take time off from life's duties. And there's movement. So movement and exercise is really critical. Those are the three legs. And then the top of that stool that ultimately everything rests upon is mental health. Because the way that we can manage our stress and the way that we can, if we feel powerful and in control of our lives, we're doing what we love, we're doing what makes us feel full of joy. And, if we can find that place in our life, that's what all of those other pieces are feeding. So ultimately our hormones can be in control.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that women especially, they're frustrated. I mean, one thing that's always I've found confusing, as a child, you don't have any of this stuff going on. Then all of a sudden you go into adolescence or prepubescence or whatever, and the world goes out of control and it just stays that way. Why does the body do that to a female body? It's like,
well, that's a great question. So this is the thing. And I really like to frame all of this in a way that we can really look at our hormones as gifts, and superpowers, even bigger than a gift, as a superpower, because this is the thing. We have the ability to make new people and feed them. Okay. That's amazing. It really is. And we really need to honor that we have that gift in our life. Right. However, turns out that's a lot of work, and it's a lot for a body to do. So in order for that body to be able to really make this amazing miracle happen, we have to have this extra sensitivity to the world around us, and extra sensitivity to our internal landscape as well. And so that's why our hormones can make us kind of crazy, because if we live in a way that's out of balance, and that's where we differ from men. Men are kind of similar throughout their lives, but women's bodies have to be super dynamic. And that's our gift, is that ability to shift.
mm-hmm.
So, but if we're living in a way that's out of balance, our body's like, nope, you're gonna feel crappy, and I'm gonna tell you.
Oh yeah, you can feel like a lot of women have premenstrual syndrome. They start feeling really irritable, and then all of a sudden, then you've got the menstrual cycle, and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm in so much pain. This is not handy. And then they feel better for maybe a week or two, and then it's let's do it again.
That's right. That's right. And so yes, it is great that we can reproduce people, but it's also it can also feel like a burden. And hopefully, we can, as women, I think that, just really feel empowered around, what our bodies are able to do. But also, if things don't feel right, know that you have options, and you have things that you can do as a strategy to help manage. Whether you're having super heavy cycles, or whether you're having lots of cramps, or whether you're having terrible, what they call premenstrual dysphoric disorder, AKA you're super crabby before your period, or if you're having terrible menopausal symptoms, all of these things are manageable and we have good tools. So I want you to, beyond just sort of like reframing the way we think about hormones, I also want you to know that there are tools that we can use that can really help things to be more in balance.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel.
So what kind of tools do you offer? Because, I think that all of us would like to say, hey, I just want to pop this one pill. My life is going to have total equilibrium throughout my life. I'm not going to lose my hair, this and that, I'm not going to wake up in the morning and go, what was that? What's in the mirror today? Oh, yeah. This kind of stuff.
I know that feeling. I do know that feeling. So some of the things that we can do. So obviously those three pillars of the stool, eating good food, resting when you need to rest, and moving your body. Your body's programmed to do all those things. So those are first. Those are what we call the determinants of health. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, if you need extra help, there are different botanicals that are super helpful for helping to regulate cycles, that are great for helping to manage things like hot flashes. There are really good tools, lots of, so before I became a doctor, I was an herbalist. And so I tend to lean pretty hard on my sort of what we would call herbal allies. So the different types of plants that grow in the ground that have different biochemical properties that can help to, change our inner landscape so we feel better. So like I said, I tend to lean on botanicals more maybe than other providers, but we have really good botanicals for things like adrenal fatigue and restoring adrenal health. We call them adaptogens.
Okay.
But that's part of what I do. But then we also can we can use things like different nutrients to help to so for a lot of women, one issue is that when we have a ton of stress, all of that cortisol and blood sugar spiking moves us towards metabolic syndrome or diabetes. So we can use nutrients like chromium or vanadium to help to balance blood sugar while we're getting our adrenals in line. Mm-hmm. So that's one place that we can use nutrients. I always like to make sure that your nutrients in general are replete. So optimally, you're getting all your nutrients from your food. But if you're living on the road and you're not getting fresh stuff all the time, using something like a whole foods based multivitamin that comes from food so your body can process it well.
Right.
That can be, really helpful just to make sure that you're getting everything that you need. So we have a lot of different sort of natural tools. And then one of the things that we can also use if necessary, I kind of think of it as like my last choice is we can use some bioidentical hormones to manage symptoms. And those are hormones that are natural. They're synthesized from things like soy and licorice. And they more closely match the hormones that your body would naturally make on its own.
So that basically where you need to start is to balance out the adrenals before you look at everything else. Is that kind of what people need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, so when women come to see me, generally the first thing that I do is if we're trying to figure out what hormone is actually out of balance, which, like I said, A lot of times it's more than one. A lot of times we'll do some hormone testing. And so that way we can get a good idea of, what is your cortisol doing and where are your estrogen and progesterone levels? And what about testosterone, your androgens? Those are really important too for you to feel vital and, full of energy. And then we'll look at the thyroid as well. So, the first place that I like to look as a doctor is lab results because I like the data. I want to know exactly what's happening. But for a lot of women, if you know that you're starting to have these different symptoms, if you feel like, you want to do this without seeing the lab results, adrenals are a good place to start because if you have a super stressful life and you're really tired, you can't go wrong with giving yourself some adrenal support.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I'll be doing. I'll be checking into that when we hang up because I've been kind of curious about that. I'm so happy we're talking. My God. Yeah.
And I know that thyroid is a huge issue, and women are more prone to thyroid irregularities, and it can run in families. I was diagnosed back in 2008 with Graves' disease. Had no idea. And that's the opposite of a slow thyroid. It's hyperthyroid. And it took, I don't know how many endocrinologists I had to actually go to in Michigan. I had to go to the Detroit area to an expert in thyroid. And he ran a couple tests. He's like, yep, that's what you have. And he said, you're on page 11 of my book. I'm like, okay. And then I'm reading this going, oh my goodness, because it can affect your eyes. And he said, your eyeballs are a little bit larger. I said, what do I do? He said, well, there's certain things you can do. He said, not a whole lot we can do to treat it. We can irradiate your thyroid. And I said, what's the worst case scenario here? Well, your eyeballs will keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger till we have to grind out your eye sockets. I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
And I've been able to regulate it, but I've had to do a lot of research because I didn't want to take any kind of artificial chemicals or anything like that. And certainly irradiating your thyroid wasn't an option I wanted to pursue. I have been taking selenium. That seems to have helped. And in really watching my diet, and so it kind of calmed itself. But it was a shock to me. And basically, when you have a hyperthyroid, you can eat, eat. It can work against you. You'll just get skinnier and skinnier.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
What?
So your thyroid, in a very basic, just for your listeners, in a very basic way, your thyroid regulates sort of the rate at which your body works.
Uh-huh.
So, to give very specific examples, if your thyroid is low, people tend to gain weight. Things are just slow down, like their heart rate slows down. They feel cold. They may get constipated. Things just sort of slow down. But if you have hyperthyroid, like you had Graves' disease, things speed up. So you lose weight. Your heart can race. You can feel sweaty. You can have diarrhea, things just are moving a little bit faster. Yeah. And yes, exophthalmos, that's where your eyeballs pop out. That is no joke. And that's something you definitely have to be super aware of. And so, with the thyroid, that is something that nutrients do work super well with because something like selenium tends to block the antibodies that will attack your thyroid. So that you're doing that, and that can be super helpful. Things like tyrosine is an amino acid, and that is a building block for thyroid hormone. And so people can use that. Things like iodine, because that's also one of the primary things that your thyroid hormone is made out of. That can be helpful. But I do want to just mention to your listeners, because I do have a lot of patients who will come in and either they've seen on the internet or someone has recommended to them to take high dose iodine. And I really, that's something that I see a lot, and it's been kind of popular in the natural medicine community for a long time.
Yeah.
But high dose iodine is very unpredictable, and it can make your thyroid go way high or way low, and you kind of don't know what it's going to do. So I tend to just, take the amount, the RDA amount of iodine.
Sure. The endocrinologist that had finally diagnosed me told me to stay completely away from iodine because it would be toxic to me because of the Graves and so forth. So
That's right.
I use sea salt and I stay completely away from any kind of iodine. If I were to have surgery, I have to avoid like a betadine solution, any of that, any kind of contrast agent. If I were to have any kind of testing done, it can't be iodine based. So
that's right.
That doesn't seem to be the case, though, with people with hypothyroidism.
That's right. Sometimes people, hypothyroid is far more common in the world than hyperthyroid.
Mm-hmm.
Hypothyroidism is it's very common in certain places where there's not a lot of iodine in the diet, and so if you've ever heard of a goiter, that's when you don't get enough dietary iodine, and so people can.
My grandmother on my dad's side had goiter.
Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, and that's why they started iodizing all our salt, is because goiter was so common in previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
Iodine can be it's really important, and it's absolutely critical. But if you have hyperthyroid, then you do want to take your time to stay away from it.
Mm-hmm. Is there? I know there's not a one size fits all, but is there a way that women can take control of their bodies? Because it really does feel like we're out of control. As soon as we become adolescents, our body betrays us in some way. How do we bring it back into balance and look and feel the way we want?
Well, that's such a great question. And that's actually my favorite part of my practice, is when I get to work with women who are able to discover things about themselves that they know that when they do X, I'm going to feel like Y. And I know that if I do something else, then I'm going to feel better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So a great place to start with that is your diet, because the things that you eat it's very concrete. It's very easy to see. And so with a lot of women, I'll do food sensitivity testing to see if there's anything that's actually that they are eating that is causing some reactivity in their body. And often, when we see people, so there's allergies, which, sort of like, people eat shellfish or they eat peanuts and they blow up right away. That's one type of allergy. But there's a type of sensitivity that's delayed that a lot of people will have towards different types of foods, that when they eat them, they may have symptoms that don't come up for several hours or even a couple of days. And so this is something you can do on your own. You do not have to test. Sometimes testing makes a little clearer as to what you do with food eliminations and reintroductions. But for some people, what we'll see is that when you eat certain foods, it can cause symptoms. So that can cause mental problems. It can cause agitation or anxiety or depression. Certain foods can.
Like gluten.
Absolutely. And for people who are, who have any sort of autoimmune thyroid issue, gluten is a great one to keep out because it tends to really aggravate that issue. And, there are other food things like, I think for me, the top few that I see are gluten and dairy and eggs. And sometimes I'll see soy as a problem for people. But, doing some basic testing where you'll say, okay, I'm going to take this out of my diet for 2 weeks. I'm going to see how I feel. And then you add it back and you see how you feel. And that can really, the types of things, I also see physical manifestations, things like rashes and joint pain and asthma, different skin manifestations. And it can really play a big role in helping you start to feel like you're in control of things. Like, oh, if I stop, drinking wine for 3 weeks, my sleep gets better, my hot flushes get better, and my energy gets better. Mm-hmm. And so doing these different experiments, I like to think of them as experiments because you don't have to think that you have to do it forever. You take something out of your life, you put it back, you see how you felt without it and how you feel with it again. And that can be very empowering. So that's one way that we can really take, power is, a diet is, changing things in your diet, changing our habits can make a big difference. And we can do, other types of things like, start walking 30 minutes a day, see how you feel. Just making these small changes that give you an awareness of how your body reacts and how your body feels is huge.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
TNCRadio.live is proud to carry the Steve Summers Overnight Drive Show. TNCRadio.live is dedicated to commercial drivers. We offer the news, traffic, and weather you need, and the entertainment, sports, talk, music, and celebrity interviews you want to hear 24/7. We have original shows and trucker podcasts that feature some of your favorites, like Ice Road Alex Debogorski and America's Truckin' Sweetheart Marcia Campbell. TNCRadio.live is convenient and designed for professional drivers. The best part is we're free, and you can listen anywhere you are on the road. With just one tap, you can tune into Steve Summers and us right on your phone. Simply download our app by going to app.tncradio.live. That's app.tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel.
What about sugar? Tell us how does that affect hormones, or does it?
So sugar can absolutely impact our hormones in a couple of ways. One is the blood sugar. I know blood sugar issues is a huge problem in the trucking community. It's a huge problem in our whole society. When we have chronically elevated blood sugar, it really, it can lead to things like diabetes, and that's important. But from a hormone perspective, chronically elevating the blood sugar really impacts a few things. It impacts cortisol levels, just because those tend to bounce around as the blood sugar bounces around as well. When we have chronically elevated blood sugar, it can increase our testosterone levels. And when testosterone levels are high, it suppresses our production of progesterone. And that can do a couple of things. One is it can give us, hot flashes and that kind of thing. All those sort of menopausal symptoms, but also during our reproductive years, if our progesterone levels are low and our testosterone is high, it can lead to something called PCOS, which can really impact our cycles, and it can really impact our ability to, get pregnant. So those are some of the ways. And then just sort of like on a basic level, on a day-to-day level, if you eat a bunch of sugar or drink a bunch of wine, tends to be the worst, but any alcohol, in the evening, that tends to be the two biggest triggers for hot flashes.
Interesting.
So I'm assuming people, it's a good idea to quit drinking pop or soda, I guess, as you guys say in the States.
Yeah,
that's right.
Pop is a Canadian
or
thing.
Soda. There are a lot of good reasons to not drink pop or soda. One of them is the sugar, for sure. And then the other is that a lot of them have phosphoric acid in them. That's how they make the bubbles. And that is very hard on your bones. So I know that we all know
really?
and avoid osteoporosis as, later in life. And that phosphoric acid can really be troublesome with, causing bone loss.
I did not know that.
And
thank you.
Calcium is important throughout a woman's life. Am I correct? I mean, when you think about it, if a woman has a child, she faces calcium depletion during the pregnancy and everything else. How does a woman protect against osteopenia, osteoporosis, all of that?
Absolutely. So estrogen is a big factor in bone health. So because estrogen actually helps to replace that healthy bone. So once we go through menopause, we need more calcium. But it's not just about calcium. It needs to be a balance. So calcium is important, but also magnesium to balance the calcium is important. And then we also have some of the micronutrients, things like boron, again, vanadium, that can be really, really, vitamin K, those are all, and vitamin D, those are all really important for bone health. And so, postmenopausally, I do, and especially for women like me who are young breast cancer survivors who got to go through menopause real early, it is extra important because a lot of women who are taking things like tamoxifen or other estrogen blockers, tamoxifen does not impact bone health, but if you're taking some of the other estrogen blockers that can really impact bone health. So the nutrition is really important. And then the other piece postmenopausally is weight-bearing exercise. So the more pressure we put on our bones, the more our bones say, oh, we need to replace ourselves. And so if you're seated all day long, once you are up, it's important that if you can take a jog, if you can take a walk, if you can, do some weightlifting, anything that's weight bearing, that's exercise, is going to really yield huge rewards for your bones over time.
There's so many things that go into how the body reacts to things. It's so interesting, and I'm not sure we can unpack this all in an hour. But oh wow! I mean, you've really come up with some information here I had not heard about, and this is terrific. Do you work with people remotely? Can they call you up or reach out to your website and say, "Hey"?
Sure. Yeah. So I do have a website. It's goldenholisticmedicine.com, and I love working with women and helping their get their hormones back into balance. And we can do that as, I can be your doctor, but I also teach courses, and you can take my classes through my website. Again, I do have that Women's Hormone Transformation Masterclass that I'm actually starting the next round here on March 8th. Because I just want everyone to, know all these things that they can do to care for themselves for the long term.
Oh, it's super important. And I think,
thanks to the pandemic, I would say probably 75% of my appointments these days are by telemedicine. So I see folks all over the place.
So essentially you can order a blood work, and then you look and see what's going on in each person's body. Am I correct?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have all sorts of interesting ways that we can test, get different information than you might get from your conventional provider. And I do look at your regular blood results as well. Things like your blood count and your chemistries and your thyroid. Those things I absolutely look at. But then we can also do more in-depth panels about how your hormones are functioning. We can look at things like food sensitivities. If you're having digestive issues, which so many of us do, we can do things like stool microbiome. So we know what's actually living in there. So if you want to take something like a probiotic, you know which one to take.
Oh, cool.
So we've got all sorts of really interesting ways that we can dig into your personal balance.
This is really, really cool, because I think a lot of women feel like they're off kilter. They feel like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and they just want to draw to center because they're afraid they're going to fall one way or the other. It's like, what is happening to my body at any given time with the hormonal shifts and everything?
Yeah, I mean, and as women, we balance so much. We have, I run a business. I have 2 daughters. We all have so much going on, and we're responsible for so many parts of our lives. And even when they're all parts of our lives that are so beautiful and so important, and we feel so good tending to them, it's still a lot to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if we, and the other part of that is because we're tending so many things, we tend to get tended last.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And the thing is, when you get tended last, we don't hold up. If you don't tend to your equipment, it breaks down. And we have to tend to our own selves so we can continue to take care of everything around us.
Sure. Where do people find you, Dr. Kaycie?
So my website is goldenholisticmedicine.com. And you are welcome to take a look there, and you're always welcome to send me an email. It's which we can put on the link.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaycie. We're running out of time here, but you've really given us a lot of great insight onto how the body works, because sometimes it's just a mystery.
Yes, it is a wonderful mystery, but I really hope that we can all, unravel enough that we can all keep feeling well.
I'm definitely going to be contacting you about my whole issues that are going on. Like, I'm feeling I'm all over the place. So wonderful. I'm so happy we had you on the show today.
Absolutely. It's just so much fun to talk with you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Kaycie. This is terrific.
You've been listening to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kaycie Grigel. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a topic or feedback, email us at info@tncradio.live.
Thank you for listening to another great interview on tncradio.live. All of the material you hear on tncradio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of tncradio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live.